right, I think we are live. Welcome to the Gospel Jazz. We are having conversational, improvisational,
conversational
improv. Thank you. Through life, leadership, and Jesus. We'll get it straight.
What have you been drinking this morning?
Just coffee, I swear. I promise, just coffee. Hey, we do have some changes coming up. This might be one of our last recordings from this studio, maybe? Perhaps. We'll see. So
Depends how productive next week is.
that's what...
Yes.
But yeah, so hit that like button, hit that subscribe. We'd love to have you share this with your family, with your friends.
I wondered what changes he was talking about. when he
And
started
we're...
that.
Well, I'm just...
You should be very aware.
Well, I wasn't. Yeah, about that one. I just wondered where he was going with that.
Well, it might be our last...
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Do you think he was changing up the hosts?
That's what.
This was my last episode? Maybe this is my
This
last
is going to be all of our last episodes. There'll be somebody else here next
Some
week
changes coming here.
that nobody's aware of. Well, it's improv, okay? So this is what we're... Roll with it, man. But this is going to be...
This a new model or something.
This is part 2 of our discussion of... What have we officially labeled this
kind of
as?
spiritual language and
yeah.
engagement.
And so currently, today is February 16th. And so, is it just last week? Or are we like 2 weeks to this Asbury...
We're in the second week.
Yeah.
The second week. So there's a college down in Kentucky.
We could go yesterday. It started.
They've had a chapel service going on, which again, praise the Lord, right? Pass the ammunition. But we want to... You've never heard that phrase before?
There's a revival going on. Pass the ammunition.
Exactly. If it's the Lord's jet, I don't care. Whatever. Let's just go.
Sorry.
And it has
Lord's
just
jet
been...
needs a paint job.
We are way off the trail.
It has been just coffee, I promise. But I think today, focusing kind of on the discernment, how a lot of the times the spiritual language can be used or misused.
Clearly, I need discernment.
That's what. So that's Somebody take it away. Somebody, I'm going to stop talking.
Say something profound, please.
Oh, gosh. All right. I'll try.
Write this plane.
Some of what we were talking about a few minutes before hitting record, which I'm not sure we were ready to hit record, but here we are. We were talking about the how the pendulum in spiritual language and engagement kind of swings wide. How there are some pockets that don't really spend a lot of time acknowledging the supernatural activity of the world, our relationship to the supernatural, and there are some that they hold those as the most important parts of their relationship with God, their engagement with the world, all of that kind of stuff, and so either everything is looked at through a spiritual lens or everything is looked at through the physical lens. And this really is reflective of where we started this conversation last episode with the tension between those two, the tension of the supernatural and the physical. And I was starting to think about in relation to some of the things that we're hearing from either people that we know that are there or have been there at the Asbury revival, or some of the interest there. Just the, I don't know if misuse is probably the wrong word, but the
overuse, maybe?
The overuse of the seeking of these spiritual, maybe we could even say hyper spiritual experiences and turning them into the be all end all.
And again, I think ultimately too, just we're not against that, right? I mean,
right.
To me, back to youth ministry stuff, right? I mean, it was nice going away to a conference, right?
Yeah.
Or to camp and having that retreat, right? Where you are able to get away, you are able to focus, right? You are able to study or hear from the Lord, right? I mean, those moments are needed. I mean, we see Jesus even seeking those moments out. However, right, you can't stay there.
Yeah.
Right? You can't stay up on the top of the mountain. I mean, well, quite literally, look at Moses, right? He was up there for 40 days, and all of the trouble the people got themselves into, in the 30 or 40 days that he's up there, right? So you can't isolate yourself and just stay in that moment, right? You've got to come back down into the valley, right? And go, hey, here's the word from the Lord. Here's what we need to be doing. Here's the direction we need to be going in. Here's who we need to be serving.
Yeah.
Right. Here's who we need to be loving. And so again, I don't think any of us are against those things, but let's just make sure that it has its proper place within our priorities and what we're seeking after.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think it's interesting. In our church, we follow the liturgical calendar, and this upcoming Sunday is Transfiguration Sunday. So Jesus is he goes up to the mountaintop with the three disciples, and they have the experience there with who is on
Elijah?
Yeah, Elijah and
Abraham.
And Abraham, yeah. And one of the disciples, I think it's Peter, says, "Well, hey, let's build a shelter." I mean, he's like, "Let's stay right here. This is it. This is as good as it gets. There's no reason to ever leave." and then there are some really interesting things that happen there. In short, Jesus says, "No. The work is not here. The work is down there with the people, side by side, hand in hand, working with people." The spiritual experience, and your point is really good. I think we talked about this maybe on Monday at our breakfast, just about, I love those experiences, those retreats, conferences, concerts, where you do have this like overwhelming experience. You can't stay there. It's not sustainable from an emotional standpoint just to be always on this, "Oh, I'm way up here." There has to be this place where you come back down to reality and go, all right, what did I learn there that is actually going to help me in this moment here, right now?
And again, obviously, right, we certainly not picking on any of our charismatic or Pentecostal brothers and sisters, but and again, I think every tradition has their pitfalls, right? And so, I mean, that's right. Our traditions have our pitfalls, and so I think in some of those traditions, right, those are some of those pitfalls if you're not careful. We talked about this, I think, in an episode maybe last year, but, you hear these stories of people when Mother Teresa was still alive, right? People that would go over to Calcutta to join her in her ministry, right? With this idea, I'm going to go serve with Mother Teresa. It's going to be great. You're like, here, hold this baby while the baby dies. So it has some sort of human connection while it's dying. You're like, oh, that's not what I signed up for.
Yeah, not the picture
right?
I had.
Yeah, I was going to go do this great thing. And you go, well, you are doing a great thing. Just wasn't
Glamorous.
It wasn't glamorous. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, that's the thing.
Glamorous, that's good.
That's our propensity, especially in Western and American Christianity, is big, glamorous, influential.
The celebrity attraction.
The celebrity culture of it all.
Baptized 3,000 people.
Yeah, we got to quantify the work. We've got to justify it. We've got to and look, because the evidence of our success is in our ability to quantify it, right? Yeah. And we very easily forget that Jesus was a failed rabbi, right? He had a failed mission, right? By all of those standards, by all of those, I mean, you talk about unglamorous, the dude was crucified naked in front of everybody, right? And made a mockery of. As he hung upon the cross, they mocked him.
Sure.
Everybody thought he had failed.
Yeah.
And of course we can spiritualize that. And no, sure, we know that there was something deeper happening that nobody had eyes to see. The point is that in that moment and throughout much of Jesus' ministry, he wasn't doing a whole lot of glamorous stuff.
Yeah.
Right? What did he do when he got off that mountain? There was somebody down there waiting for their son to have a demon cast out of him, right? Or
the disciples couldn't.
The disciples couldn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Big deal.
So that's not...
Yeah.
We might look at that and go, oh, look how amazing that is. In the first century, that was not glamorous. That was the epitome of uncleanliness,
sure.
Right? And that's what Jesus enters into.
Yeah.
He's in the business of that. Where would Jesus be? He'd be in Calcutta holding a baby while it dies. Yeah. It's the unglamorous, lowly, toiling work that Jesus did.
This was a little bit to Matt's point at breakfast this last week. And again, I got what he was saying. Again, I think the numbers were probably bigger than just 120, but But kind of to his point that, I mean, yeah, at that moment of crucifixion, you've got maybe a solid core of 120 people, right? You've spent 3.5 years, right? And you've got just barely triple digits of, and again, I think there was probably quite a few thousand people, right, that have obviously had their lives impacted during Jesus's ministry. But I mean, yeah, it's just back to that.
But when it came to that moment, they weren't going to impact. They'd bought into the narrative, and they wanted him crucified. And how many of those people were there to watch him fail?
And his disciples had largely already left. The only one that's still standing there is John. And there seems like the only reason he is there is an obligation to Jesus' mother. Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about a quantifiable failure.
Well, even Peter, right? I don't know that guy.
Yeah, right.
I don't know that dude.
Sure, right.
You know, I tell this quite often to my congregation members, you know, because we raise chickens, and there is hardly a morning that goes by that I don't hear that rooster crow that I just go, just sticks a little bit, you know, you go, Yep, every day. Right, every day, just a kind of reminder. Go, yeah. Before that rooster crows, you have already denied me 3 times. You know, and so yeah. To think, that there was some huge. Again, we quantify it or justify it in worldly terms, but again, and I think this goes back to it. Here's the balance, right? As we talk about that pendulum swinging and that tension and keeping that balance right between the supernatural and the natural, right? Of because there are those things that are unquantifiable. You go, hey. You missed out on a life-giving moment in the church because you didn't show up for this event or this teaching or whatever it was, or hey, you missed a really good service or whatever it might be. And so, just there was that, but then now we did something we usually don't do publicly. We usually do it privately, but we did an anointing service for a gentleman Sunday. He's had issues with his leg for years. And the same thing, expecting and hoping that there will be some sort of miraculous healing. I mean, it doesn't mean that he met with a surgeon Tuesday, you know, but then it's still one of those things you go, okay, so if that leg ends up still being a bum leg forever, who's going to go help him? Right?
Yeah.
To get yard work done or to get things done around the house. I mean, whatever, to me, it's that kind of thing of going, okay, we did this moment, we had this great service, but then what's the follow up after that, right? Mm-hmm. You know, what's the long term?
Well, and that's the power of the incarnation, right? That we serve a God who is infleshed. So, what did Jesus do for 30 years before he started his public ministry?
Well, he was over here in North America.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like, other than that. When he got back from his trip to North America. No, what did he do for 30 years? He worked in his right? He was trained to be a carpenter by his father. He took on the family business. He took care of his mother, right? He sat at the table with her every night and ate with her. He knew neighbors, right? He built homes for people.
Yeah.
He lived life as mundane and ordinary as any rest of us. You want to know how mundane Jesus' life was? We don't have record of it. That's how mundane it was. You want to know how ordinary he was? He's just some guy in Nazareth, right? And he was no less God in those moments, right? If we truly believe, if we believe in Orthodox Christian theology, right? We're not docetic that says that he, wasn't actually fully God or that he was some imitation of it, right?
Yeah.
If he was as much God sitting, working, building a home for somebody or repairing a cart or doing whatever he did with his hands.
But that's not glamorous, Jake. That's a great word.
Yeah. I mean, So in doing that, what does God do? He's sanctifying the monotony of life. Because Jesus did it, going to work and providing for your family is sanctified, right? It's holy work. Living in community with somebody, being somebody's neighbor, that's holy work. Why? Because that's what Jesus did for 30 years.
Yeah.
And he was no less God doing that than he was God hanging on the cross or feeding 5,000. So but our propensity is to ignore that and focus only on, again, the glamorous, the things that gets a crowd, and the things that are flashy and frankly powerful, right? They give us power and influence. And we forget that God spent most of his time just living life. There's power in that. Because what it does is it means you can be a follower of Christ and be human. You don't have to forsake your humanity to be a disciple of Christ.
Yeah.
But and to me, that's how you change a neighborhood.
It is.
Right? That's how you change generational sin, right? That's how you, right? It starts in the home, right? And then, right, we have a group of homes that do this. It changes the neighborhood. It changes the culture, right? And then, right, that just changes your workplace. It changes the school. Right?
Yeah.
It's in every single area and aspect, or should be, right, in our lives. That.
Why do you think the people in Nazareth wanted to run him off of a cliff? Because they knew him for 30 years as Joseph's son who lives who's just here, and now he's standing before us and saying, the prophet's words have been fulfilled in your hearing. I'm the fulfillment of it. They thought he'd lost his ever-loving mind.
Well, just like Joseph.
Yeah.
Right, back, right. Oh, he's the dreamer. Here comes the dreamer, right?
Yeah.
Here comes the...
Yeah.
And it's the young punk kid that saves all of them. Mm-hmm. You know?
So I think the incarnation sanctifies humanity, what it is to be fully human, which means that we need emotional highs because we're emotional beings, right? You need those mountaintop experiences. Jesus had those. You need those moments of high emotive moments, but you can't live there. Right? Because for every emotional high, there is an emotional low. There is depression. Jesus got depressed. I promise you, he was depressed at some moment, right? He had anxiety at some moment. He was frustrated, right? He got the flu. He lived as human as we are. So, but our propensity is to elevate the spiritual and to elevate the supernatural and to elevate all of these things that feel, frankly, magical, right?
Yeah.
We get drawn up into them because they feel because they defy what is natural, right? And we want a God who defies what is natural. Not unfortunately, but you know what I mean? And that mindset, unfortunately, we wound up with a God who is as human as the rest of us.
And that's you look at the last 10 or 12 years with the rise of the superhero movies, and I mean all of that feeds into that, right? Because it is wanting to be something bigger than myself, and again, and there's the double-edged sword of that, because you go, God is calling you into something bigger, right? He is calling you into advancing His kingdom, but again, it doesn't look like Iron Man.
You look
it doesn't
at
look like Captain America, does it? Right? You know, it's,
your point about the whole rise of superhero culture. You look at. I just started noticing this probably last week. Most of the commercials on television right now have a personification of you as the hero of the moment. Just start watching commercials just through that lens, and you go, "This is everywhere. This is absolutely everywhere, where you are the king of the moment, and everybody knows you, looks at you, and you get to deliver something that is, quite honestly, stupid and temporary. The best picture you've ever taken in your life. And everyone goes, oh, what a beautiful picture. Get this phone. This will do it for you." I mean, it is unbelievable how the desire to be famous, known, recognized has just permeated every corner of our culture, including the church.
Yeah.
That celebrity culture.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to be a hero. So in our circles, and even the best of intentions, everybody wants to be a hero for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So I did a Poverty 101, which is a seminar training thing that I do for a group Monday morning. And we got done, and it's like drinking from a fire hose, especially when I have to do it in a compressed version like I did that morning. There is a lot of information there, and you get to the end of it and you go, so what are you supposed to do with this? Right? What are you supposed to do with it? How do you, there's so much wrong, how do we fix it? Right? And even I had the propensity, and I said, well, find some organization, some mission that's doing something that you're passionate about. If it's food insecurity or something like that, if it's which is good and true. Get involved in something, but even that has even the root of that to some degree is be the hero, do something, right?
Yeah.
So, and it was somebody in the room said, well, I think even just awareness of something. And I said, oh, you're right. I mean, even I'm thinking, why didn't you think of that, dummy? I mean, because I talked to those ends. I just didn't put those. If you want to do something to change poverty in your community, then walk out of this room with a better awareness of what it's like. Even that is a win, right? Mm-hmm. So that the next time you're in a grocery store and you see somebody using a bridge card to buy steak, you don't automatically cast judgment upon them for doing it, but you know how to understand why they might be doing that, right?
Right.
So that the next time you see somebody going to 2 food pantries, you don't automatically assume that they're taking advantage of the system. Maybe they're doing something to survive.
Which is less than 10 or even probably 5% of the people
That's
that
right.
are going to food pantry, because we track all that stuff.
Yes, that's right.
And even of that 5% or so, it's usually an honest mistake on their part that one food pantry ended almost a month ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, there's hardly anybody that's actually taking advantage.
And let's be honest, even if they're taking advantage of it, they're not getting rich doing it. Right? What are they're getting an extra box of commodity food, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tuna casserole that nobody wants to actually eat.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, but here's the in my mind, here's the connection, right? Our propensity is to do something. We got to fix it.
Sure.
You don't have to fix it. Just assume a different attitude. Like that's how you change. That's how you do something about it. Don't sit in judgment of people who have less than you. Mm-hmm. That's something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, at least in my mind, the parallel, if I can remember what we were talking about before, the parallel is we want to be that hero. We want to do something supernatural. We want to have the big story. We want to do something big for God.
Story, yes.
Right? No, just if you don't have to fix the systems of injustice, just be just.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
just be just. You don't have to legislate mercy. Just be merciful.
Yeah.
And you can that in and of itself is
Well, to me,
sanctified.
and this is just, this is the forced multiplication of God giving each one of us His Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
As you
yeah.
know, it's not just about you or you or me. It's about all of us.
Yeah.
Right? Being active, being...
So if I act just or merciful on my own, that's one thing. But if all of us decide to do that, just the 3 of us decide to act just and mercifully, what does that then do? That Holy Spirit multiplication, that's a good phrase to start adopting and go, how am I enacting the thing that God has called me and created me to do?
I mean, that's the whole thing. Even with Jesus being the Son of God, He realizes, right? I can't stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I'm still just one man.
Yeah.
Right? I have got to go to give you a comforter, right? And
Yeah.
He's the one that's going to lead you and guide you and remind you of all of these things and convict you and right? I mean, it just and even as we talk about want to be in the superhero, I mean, the disciples fell into that same trap.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Right? Well, I want to sit at the left hand. You get to sit at the right hand. And
That's right.
Who's going to be the Ministry of Defense and who's going to be the economic advice?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, time out, guys. Time out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those guys saw Him in the flesh and they missed it. So I mean, so it shouldn't surprise us or shock us that we still miss it and don't get it.
Yeah.
Even now.
I mean, so we've been talking about the practical, ordinary activity of the Spirit of God in positive ways that our lives have impact in the ordinary breathe in, breathe out of the day. Let's flip the coin over and talk for a minute about the nefarious spiritual activity that goes on. It is really easy to point to the big things and go, that's the devil. Those are demons that are acting. I mean, so just to put a real fine point on one experience in Brazil, we heard about this was probably a month and a half ago or so, of the election not going the way that a particular incumbent wanted it to go, and he called on the religious organizations of that country, said there were demons in the voting booth, and that's why I didn't get elected, and the whole place went completely nuts. Riots,
They breached their capital, I think.
They did. They did, oddly enough.
With military weapons? I don't know.
What?
I don't know.
I don't know. Possibly. But so with that in mind, I then heard a conversation. This might have been on a Holy Post episode. I'll look this up and we'll try and link it in the description. But they were just talking about, whoever this was talking about...
It was Holy Post.
Okay. They were talking about the simple fact that, like in our country, I'm trying to think here, We are so deceived in this country by the use and influence of money and power that these are the spiritual tools used by the devil, and we don't even realize it. I mean, we want to point to, okay, this, yeah.
So there's that fine line, right, where you go, right, the natural versus the supernatural, because there are some simple things like technology where, and again, I don't want to get us down this rabbit hole, right, where you go, I could just press a button and make the voting machines say whatever, right, but there's nothing, right, there's no demons in there, right, but I've used,
I've used my power and influence to create an outcome that I want.
Exactly. And again, it might not even be that nefarious, right? I mean, I forget what the documentary was a couple years ago, but where they showed, again, right, just the power of social media and getting that to influence people's voting tendencies even by 5 or 10%, which when we have most elections that are only decided by 2 or 3% anyways, that's all you've really got to sway is 5 to 10%, right? And so even in those, and again, I mean, it's a dangerous conspiracy hold jump down, but again,
but it's not too far off.
But those are all the levers, right?
Yes.
And so I think, at least to the One Holy Post podcast that I saw, the one lady that was on there, but again, her saying, look, those spiritual things can maybe take a different form, right, in our culture versus another culture.
Sure.
Right? But again, just to label it all spiritual, right, I think you miss the point of going, it could just be people with their hands on the levers of power, right? And just
because
and flipping switches, right? I mean, let's not over spiritualize something that's just it's the wizard behind the curtain.
Well,
right? I mean,
because what inevitably ends up happening, and this happens in the context of local churches all the time. We've talked about this before, right? We do something, even maybe ill-advised, or maybe it's just people blow stuff out of proportion. It's really the enemy who's trying to do this. No. Don't give the enemy more credit than he's worth. We're perfectly capable of sowing destruction and creating problems and beating each other up.
Fruits
we
of the
don't
flesh.
need the enemy to do it.
Fruits of the flesh, right?
Yeah.
Dissension, factions, hate, jealousy, right?
So what ends up happening is, and they get into this in that Holy Post episode too, we don't have to deal with our own stuff if we can blame it on the enemy.
Yes.
I don't have to be responsible for if my wife, and then this is kind of ambiguous, if my wife has a demon and that's why we have marital problems, I'm not responsible for the fact that I, am a jackass. She has a demon.
Yes, it's her
He
fault.
cussed first. Wasn't me. Sorry, it's okay. Well, but it is right that your point is, and language is well deserved, right? Well, I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, that's a great example. It's the thing too where the person that smokes 3 packs a day and go, oh, the devil gave me lung cancer. You're like, same thing. You need to take some responsibility. You had a smoking habit for 50 years. Sorry that it's finally caught up with you. But again, right, there's the consequences. And I think that's part, right? There are the natural consequences of our own actions or choices that we make. Yeah. And again, can there be spiritual elements or influence that? Quite possibly. Yeah. But let's not over spiritualize it. Yeah, for my...
And the importance of consequences is I think an important thing to note. And this goes back to some of our conversation that we have had about the posture and nature of God, right? If God is fundamentally angry with us for being sinful, then these things aren't consequences, they're punishments. They're spiritual punishments because we have done wrong and we're sinful, and then this is, right? But if the posture of God is fundamentally loving and grieved over our sin, then these things are consequences, right? Death is a consequence of our sin.
Yeah.
Disease is a consequence of our sin. Consequences are not the same thing as punishments, right? Now, a punishment is certainly a consequence. Don't get me wrong, but consequences can also just be benevolent or the natural follow-up to something that has happened. Death is the consequence of chaos. When we live according to the nature of chaos and death and destruction, we get death.
Yeah. Yep.
That's why Jesus came to bring new life, to put death to death, and to bring about new creation, right? So the nature of consequences is important because it speaks to the nature and posture of God. So when we just blame everything on something else and we make it spiritual, we ultimately put God in a position that I don't think he's fundamentally in.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's the same way with dealing with your children, right? Right. they mess up or they do something, whatever. Again, knowing where the lines are, right? And you step outside and you go, hey, look, say that one of our kids has some privileges taken away from him today. And again, Chris and I are not gleefully, we get to torture you that you don't get to do the stuff you want to, right? You go, buddy, look, that's a consequence of your actions, how you acted, how you spoke, right, to your other siblings. Yeah. So you know what? You're going to lose something because of that. And we're hopefully teaching you, right? I mean, right? You don't despise discipline, right? As the Proverbs say, right? The Father will disciplines those he loves, right? So you go, God, he doesn't hate me. He loves me. To say, look, there's consequences to these decisions you've made. Yeah. And so, I think, and we just over-spiritualize things. And again, I think, paint with a broad brush, especially you guys dealing with Hope House, and a lot of folks that are in those positions can be hyper-spiritual. That's maybe the nicest way to put that.
We've seen plenty of that.
Right? And you go, and again, right, the kernels of truth that are in there, but trying to peel back some of those layers going, look, but there's some things that you need to do as well, right? And again, that's what the Hope House exists for, right? So give you hopefully a safe place to start getting some of those things back in order. And then again, there's a guy that I've been working with. Is he the same thing? Is trying to bring his life into order, just starting to see, it is things just not line up for him, and it breaks my heart. But I just keep trying to encourage him, say, look, part of this is because you're in a dysfunctional situation, and so the dysfunction wants to keep you dysfunctional, right?
Yeah.
And again, there might be some spiritual forces at work too. But at the same time, you go, dude, start, you want to get married, you want to have kids, these are all good things. You need to be working and having a job, right? Those are all of those things that need to be put in order. And so,
Christ consistently calls us to allow our lives to be changed by him. And when we resist that, whether it is big decisions or little tiny ones that all add up, those are spiritual issues. They may not have a demon attached to them. They may not have some sort of supernatural experience that everybody can see attached to them, but they're still spiritual issues. Long time ago, I'm going to mention a name that might get us more or fewer followerships. Rob Bell had a video. It was a teaching series that he did and traveled the country, and it was called Everything is Spiritual. That video is extraordinary because he just talks about how the interconnectedness of the universe and us as individuals is a spiritual thing. It's not a physical thing. There was an experiment, and I'm trying to think when this was. It was not long after they were able to split an atom, and they took paired electrons, one to the East Coast and one to the West Coast. And I don't exactly understand all the science of this, and I'm probably getting some of this wrong. But what they did was, as I remember just off the top of my head here, at MIT and at CIT in California and New York, they reversed the polarity of one of the electrons, and it immediately affected the other one that was separated by 1,500 miles. The continent, yeah. Physically, that doesn't make any sense because they're completely separate. I mean, we think everything is very local, and there are a lot of locally influenced things. But the butterfly effect.
Yeah,
that's another thing that has some science behind it.
Yep.
Everything in our world, God has created a physical universe, but it is also spiritually interconnected in ways that we don't even fully understand. So if we think that our decisions and the choices we make on a daily basis don't have spiritual implications, not related to demons and healings and who goes to hell and who goes to heaven, but spiritually interconnected, I think we're kind of kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, because we are spiritual and physical realities, right? We are bodies and souls. Now, what we are not is a soul trapped in a body, right?
Right.
And we are not. We are no more a soul with a body than we are a body with a soul. We are both things, created for both things.
That's hard for us to understand.
It is, but the importance is, we are spiritually interconnected, and that is a real reality. the problem has been we have overemphasized the spiritual at the expense of the physical, and that's when it becomes Gnosticism, right?
Yeah.
Early, before we started recording, you said not everything that's spiritual is Gnostic, which is true, right? It's Gnostic when it's spiritual at the expense of the physical.
Of the physical.
Right? When the physical is demonized or is made... That notion of we are souls trapped in a body, that's Gnostic. We were created for both.
Sure.
We have overemphasized the spiritual, and we talk about pendulum swinging, right? We cannot swing so far as to say that we are not a spiritual being, that we don't have spiritual connectivity, that physical things don't have spiritual implications. They do. So this is... To be careful, this is not an overcorrection like what you're saying, but in the context of this conversation, as we talked about some of that spiritual abuse, right, and that supernatural abuse and that stuff, it becomes Gnostic because it suggests that what is physical is evil.
Yeah.
Well, that cannot be true if you serve a God who is in the flesh, right?
And if our theology
physical?
is about the redemption of all things,
Right.
that should, at some level, include the physical parts of our existence here.
And this comes back. We have used salvation as we're saving souls. We gotta have saved souls.
Yeah.
We gotta win souls. We have to win persons, right? Souls and bodies.
Yeah.
God cares about the salvation of our bodies. If He didn't, we wouldn't be raised at the end.
Yeah.
Right? Resurrection is the ultimate salvation of the body. New creation is the ultimate salvation of this creation. We live according... And when Paul talks about the flesh, he's not talking about this. He's talking about the order of the flesh, right? He's talking about the order of chaos and death and destruction. He's not talking about our incarnation.
Yeah. Yeah. The pictures of receiving a new body as a part of the new creation, the resurrection of the body, something that is new. It's very interesting to me, and this is when Jesus comes back and appears after his death and resurrection, he looks the same. They recognize him. He shows them the scars in his hands.
Still got,
He says to Thomas, put your hand in my side, because that hole is still there.
Yeah.
The body is new, but it also retains... that's just a very interesting dynamic.
Fascinating.
I'm just hoping we can teleport the way he did. Just appear in rooms like that.
I think so. Well, this goes,
Now then we can be the hero of the story, right? Because then you just...
just talk about the importance of the physical. Hebrews 11, is that kind of is the hall of faith heroes, through the Old Testament. The one thing that's mentioned of Joseph, which, again, you've got 10 chapters of Genesis, pick any of those amazing stories about Joseph. And the writer of Hebrews says, and Joseph gave to his descendants instructions of what to do with his bones. Right? You think of his whole life, you think that's what he gets. And I don't want to get into a, cremation versus whatever, but,
Right.
again, the physical is important, right? This is, I don't know if this fits anywhere or not. Maybe somebody needs to hear this. But for the last 2 months, I've had a friend of mine. They've been kind of on my heart and mind, but haven't really done much with that. Even in my own, just praying or whatever. They just got. And I just found out the other day that they attempted suicide. Thankfully, we're not successful. But it's one of those things. It's the same thing of going, okay, do I need to be a little more attentive? Right, to those times when the Lord is putting somebody on my heart or bringing somebody to my mind, right? Do I need to make a phone call? How hard would that have been to just shoot a quick text? Hey, just thinking about you today. Want to let you know I love you. Praying for you, right? And again, I think we need to be careful too, because you go, that'll keep you up at night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, what if I would have just sent, okay, but I didn't. And so here we are, and they're still alive. Praise Jesus. Okay, so now, right, to me, right, you go, I love the scriptures. I love it so much. I don't know exactly where it's at. But his mercies are new every day, right? So you go, okay, so today's a new day.
Yeah.
Right? Today's a new day. Hopefully I've learned from that.
Yes.
And go, okay, I feel the Lord put somebody in my heart and mind, right?
Yeah.
And again,
I told my basketball team last night after a tough loss,
man.
I said, all we have is tomorrow. You don't get this game back. You didn't play well. He had one quarter, you didn't play well. That ends up being the difference. All we have is tomorrow.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with tomorrow? What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully we learn, we grow, we're better.
Yeah.
And physically and spiritually.
Well, and that's right. That's the work that God is in the business of doing even now, right?
Yeah.
We are new creations. We're new creations today, not right, and tomorrow, right? Tomorrow
Yes.
we are being restored to the image of God, right? So that idea of tomorrow, what are you going to do with tomorrow, right? That is God's continual work of sanctifying us, of making us new creations.
Yeah.
And we're
This is just real quick. As Jesus starts to reveal, or as the disciples really get it, right, that he's the Messiah, then he starts talking about how, right, he's going to have to be turned over to the authorities and all of that. And, there's that famous, where Peter's like, I'll fight to the death, and the very famous line, right, where Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Well, the next line should maybe be the famous line where Jesus says, you don't have in mind the things of God, but the things of men.
Yes.
Right. And even with the over spiritualization, see, this is why it takes discernment, right? You go, the language, you're using all the language of things that are spiritual, but is that really a man-made thing, right? That you're looking for glory and you're looking for honor and you're looking for the experience.
I've got an idea of how this should end, and I've got the means to make it happen.
Yeah.
Let's pass the ammo.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammo.
because he was going to Jerusalem to fight.
Yes.
Sure.
He wanted to go to the capital city to wage war.
Sure.
His right, but no, that's the order of death and destruction. We're not
Yeah.
doing it that way.
The frustration
Here's
that
how,
they have.
Here's how it ends.
Yeah, the frustration they have with Jesus.
That's
is
the mind
he's
of
willing-
man.
Yeah, he's willing to go to the Capitol to die
Right.
Yeah.
instead of fight.
Peter wants to go and do something amazing in Calcutta. Jesus says, "Hold the baby."
Yeah.
Hold the baby.
Yeah.
Well, or cut down your cross and let's put it together so that we don't have to
Jesus-
trouble some soldiers to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want any soldiers to break a sweat. Right.
Well, you talk about turning a
You
system
go, here's
that is unjust.
the gun and the bullet to shoot me with.
Yes.
Right.
That is speaking.
I'll dig my own grave.
Yeah, that is
Exactly.
speaking to power in ways that challenges the
Yeah.
injustice that exists in the use of power.
That's right.
Ooh, wow.
Here's- It is. And that is the God that we serve, right? That's how lowly he's willing to be,
Yeah.
right? That's how. Excuse me. That's how humble, right?
Yeah.
To use a phrase from The Mandalorian, this is the way.
This is the way. Hey, I think that was good.
Yeah.
Great discussion.
Yep.
Again, thanks for joining us. Hope that you've enjoyed it as well. Like, subscribe, share this with some friends, and hopefully it has been a blessing to you also. Have a great day.